Grief can be present in someone for many reasons. The death of a loved one, the loss of a job. With grief often comes change. You must change to adapt to any situation you're placed in. Change and grief often go hand in hand. So why does change affect grief? Well, the answer can be discovered through many different mediums. For example, through literature, as grief and change are common themes found in novels. Through the world around you, grief and change can be found everywhere in all corners of the world. Finally, through personal stories. Many people have stories of how they experienced grief. You yourself probably have one. Grief must be acknowledged in order to achieve promising change. Let's take a look to see how change affects grief in the world around us.
In Kevin Major's Holdfast, Michael's life is turned upside down when both of his parents were killed in a car crash. Michael was moved to St. Albert's to live with his Uncle Ted and Aunt Ellen. These large changes in Michael's life had negative impacts on his grief levels. It wasn't only the death of his parents that caused Michael to grieve, as when he arrived in St. Albert's, he was much more angry and had a shorter temper. An example would be when Michael punched Henson in the face for doing something as little as making a small joke about his girlfriend. Many times, Michael said that he wanted to leave his Uncle Ted's house because of how much he hated it there. He said, "I must have been lying in bed for an hour before I moved. I went over and over in my head just how much I hated that godforsaken hole I lived in. I wish I could get the hell out of it." He hated the new environment he lived in, for it was different than before, and because of that, he was miserable. Another change that affected Michael's grief was when him and Curtis were in the national park as a part of their road trip. This had a great impact on Michael's grief as he went from being mad and short-tempered to happy and playful when he got to the national park. This is because it reminded him of what it was like back at home, and when they were setting up traps for the rabbit, it gave Michael good memories of his father. Lastly, the change that was another turning point for Michael's grief was when he returned to his Aunt Flo's house. Even though he returned to something similar to his old life, he was still experiencing grief because it was not what he expected it to be. He expected his aunt and brother to be excited to see him, but instead they were worried and looked at him differently. He drew back. A bit of a smile came through, but nothing made him look in the least bit happy. Michael also expected to do activities with his grandfather, but instead, he was on his deathbed and soon passed away. As for Curtis, when he was home in his familiar environment, he had no grief. But when he began the road trip, his grief level rose because he was not used to the new environment. This was evident when Curtis reacted violently to a common joke the two boys made about Curtis's aggressive father.
Ron's parents got killed in the car crash. That's what you think. I never meant that. Just shut up and don't say another word.
But when Curtis arrives at Aunt Flo's house, and then his own home, he experiences less grief because he is in an environment that is more familiar to him and he feels more comfortable where he is. This is evident when he writes Michael saying how much better it is at his house, therefore showing that it's his preferred environment.
In Kevin Major's Holdfast, Michael's world completely changed after a simple act of someone drinking and being where they shouldn't have been. The world itself can feel as if it collapses on the person who experiences horrible things like death and sickness, but things like this happen in the world every day. When someone dies, funerals are held and people cry and they grieve, but when all of that is over, no one ever talks about how long they hold on to the depressing thought that their loved one is dead and they can't do anything about it. Those people want change, but the kind of change that can't happen. They usually want the person who died to come back to life so they can resume their lives and be happy and unscathed by the death of someone they care about. Anyone can hang on to those thoughts about what they could have or couldn't have done, but sometimes it's better for them to acknowledge their grief and understand the situation in order to receive the change that they truly need. People can be forced into things that they don't want to do. They can be told that their opinion is wrong, or they cannot choose a path they want to take. It's usually children under the age of 18 that have adults choose what they are to do with their current futures, no matter their opinion. Those decisions can lead those children to do rebellious things that they feel could calm their anger or hide away grief that they could be going through. Some of these things could potentially involve fighting or even running away. When going through grief, people can be clouded with different opinions, not only from themselves but from others. This can give them a mindset that those other opinions are wrong and that their ideas are for the best since they don't know who to listen to. It's during times like these that these people need to acknowledge that they're grieving, and if they can let others help them and even help themselves, they can achieve a change that's proper for them.
long has it been since your dad has been gone?
He died October of last year.
And if I may ask, how did he die?
He was killed by the collapse of his office building.
And how has your lifestyle changed since he passed?
My life has completely changed since that day. To come home and not have him there has been killing me ever since. My mother didn't want to live in our house anymore, and I never understood why. She said that it made her think of Dad, and the best thing to do was move away.
How long after did you move?
We moved in late December, right before the Christmas holidays. Up till then, Mom was packing up belongings, throw away things that made her sad, but keeping every picture and treating it like it was gold.
How did you feel about moving?
Well, I was sad that I was leaving that house because I lived there ever since I was born. And I've gone to school to the same school since kindergarten, but I think it was healthy to escape the negative environment and start a new thing somewhere else.
What is your new school like?
School's never been the same. I just can't focus that hard on anything anymore because nothing seems to matter. I have trouble making friends here because I'm very shy, but I have a few good ones and the teachers are like the rest.
Explain to me your new home life.
My new house is completely different from my old house. My old house was much larger and had a bigger backyard, much better for company, but my new house is so small. It's almost too small to fit me and my mother.
How did you feel after all this change happened?
I didn't understand it all at first because it all happened so fast. But as I've been living this way for so long, it's become natural, and I just have to live with it.
Thank you for sharing your story.
As you can see, change affects grief in many different ways. Grief and change are visible throughout literature, the world around us, and personal stories of our friends and peers. Grief must be conquered to achieve successful change, but on the flip side, change can also worsen or better grief. In conclusion, grief and change are unavoidable,